This framework, this is the most critical section of the program and something that endures and helps us understand every single sanction that we will review from here onward. There is, in the first instance, a sanctioning country. Now, we are currently looking at the US structure, but this could equally apply in other countries as well. Though it needs to be noted that A, the US has the global heft to try and do such things as target others. B, it is really the US that actually acts on its belief that it can, in fact, influence other countries. So, what the US does as a sanctioning country is with reference to a target country or target entities or target individuals. So, on the one side is the sanctioning country, on the other side is a term that we shall use, target country. The phrase targeted country, targeted entities, targeted individuals, these are phrases you will hear time and again because that is what helps us reference who is the sanctioning entity and who is the impacted entity. Now, the sanctioning country has a perspective on what is happening in the target country. This is extremely important. Targeted countries would often describe this as meddling in the internal affairs. Suspend that for a moment. Let's not go into the politics of it. But yes, the sanctioning country has a view on the politics, on the society, on economic events or circumstances in the target country. Or there might be a specific event, like in the case of China, Tiananmen Square, where pro-democracy activists flooded central Beijing and there was a severe military crackdown. So these kind of circumstances or events attract the attention of the sanctioning country, and there are a number of interest groups and lobby groups and policy groups in the US that keep an eye on all of these. And one of the important entities that maintains an ongoing watch on different parts of the world, that is something that we will be sharing with you so that you are able to look forward at events that are likely to unfold and not feel that something like Russia, Ukraine came out of nowhere. No, it did not come out of nowhere. And we're going to share with you the method by which you can keep an eye on what might next happen. Now, with that perspective on a target country, it results in a certain policy decision in the sanctioning country. So the US takes a view, for example, that how the Rohingya are treated in Myanmar, which admittedly is an internal affair in Myanmar, but how the Rohingya are treated in Myanmar requires Myanmar to be sanctioned. Or how Syria, the dictator Bashar al-Assad treats his people requires some policy intervention by the US. So those are generic in nature. They tend to be broader. And when we say generic and tend to be broader, we mean country level. So if it's a large concern, if it is associated with the country as it is, by the regime of that country as it stands, then you find broader policy, general policy, and broad sanctions that try to catch everything in its fold. And in this, we must recognize the existence of instruments of state. So it's not as if the government of North Korea is all the time doing things that need to be sanctioned. The government of North Korea has companies, entities, agencies that extend the policy of the government of North Korea. So when we have sanctions, they could be at country level, and if they are at country level, they will usually encompass those entities that are seen as extensions of the government, instruments of the state. So while looking at sanctions lists, there is no need to get confused or look at the list and start to wonder. Many of the entities over there are merely an extension of the government. And as we work through the program, you will recognize such nomenclature, such lists. And then there are entities and individuals. So there could be sanctions which are entity specific or individual specific. These are very specific triggers. Now, the simplest example of a specific trigger where an individual is sanctioned could be Osama bin Laden. There is a particular person who is engaged in a particular act of war, declared policy of attacking everything American wherever he finds it, and you could have a set of sanctions which impact that individual. Now, admittedly, that's an extreme example, but that's a good example. If I was to look at general policy triggers, at the country level, I have Iran, I have North Korea, but at the individual level, I could have somebody like Osama bin Laden, who is a Saudi citizen, but Saudi is not sanctioned. It is the individual that is sanctioned. So this presents a spectrum. If an individual or entity is found to be the driver, then that individual or entity will have targeted sanctions. If it is the country and the extension of the country through various agencies, then you can expect broad spectrum sanctions. Now, when I look at it that way, at the broad level, at a country level, you will get in sanctions orders the country name and the scope. And we are going to look at orders in the case of Iran much later on. And you can see how instruments of state from Iran are described in those documents. But yes, if it is going to be general policy, country level, you will find country name and scope. But if it is going to be entity level and individual, then it's just lists and what the entity in that list, the individual in that list is permitted or not permitted to do. And as far as implementing agencies and enforcement are concerned, every country has a set of agencies whose job is to oversee the application of the law. Usually in the US, it is the Department of Treasury, OFAC, and then you have the Bureau of Industry and Safety and the export control regime. But when it comes to enforcement, this is the nuts and bolts, the action. It's like what we usually see in movies. It's usually law enforcement, which is police, the police force or the FBI. These are people that are out there on the street with guns and, handcuffs and all that stuff. But as well, the customs agencies, which are checking the borders to see what kind of goods are coming in to a country and what kind of goods leave a country. Now, goods entering a country are of concern if they are bioweapons, if they are drugs, if they are narcotics. Goods leaving a country are also important if they are things that can be used, for example, to produce weapons of mass destruction. So there are implementing agencies which execute the purpose of the law, if you will. And then there are physical people that have to be there to check that, go out, catch them, bring them in, throw them in jail, and stuff like that. Now, usually the police or the customs are tasked across sanctions and initiatives. You don't have a separate police force to catch one kind of criminal and another police force to catch another kind of criminal. So, for example, if you were with the Drug Enforcement Authority, then you would take the local cops along to take action against a particular group. So, these enforcement agencies, those are not what we get involved with. We are more interested or focused on the implementing agency, and what we as bankers, consultants, advisors are more interested in looking at how the implementing agency wants us to comply, what is permitted, what is allowed in general licensing, and what is not. So let's take some examples. In China, ZTE Telecom is viewed as an instrument of state because of its ownership structure, which puts it firmly under the command, control of, and direction of the Chinese government or the Chinese military. Basij in Iran is an umbrella financial organization reporting under the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and is the money bags of the regime in Iran. So these entities, while not the country, are merely extensions of the country. When we talk about an entity, then we are talking about industrial companies or NGOs or trusts or other kind of organizations which cannot be equated with the country, Myanmar Economic Holdings, the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company, a number of other such companies, and we will see these names in various lists. These are the kind of entities that could be targeted, but the country is not targeted. And then, of course, there are individuals, and usually the most dramatic or direct examples of individuals are people that are part of the regime that is seen to be doing what it's doing. For example, Chinese Politburo member Chen Guangguo is said to be the person overseeing actions in Western China, the Uyghur community that is being targeted by the Chinese regime. This Politburo member is in charge of that action, so he merits sanctions in his personal name in the eyes of the US. Similarly, the Russian oligarch Konstantin Malofeyev is seen to be as a person directly in charge of certain of the actions that Putin wants done. So then these individuals, their movements are to be restricted, their access to funds are to be restricted, their ability to travel is to be restricted in the pursuit of sanctions.